Good evening and welcome back to Evelina. And Evelina's emotional roller coaster of emotions continues apace this evening as well. And her letter in fact continues because I stopped kind of halfway through it. 25th September. I rose very early this morning, and after 1,000 different plans, not being able to resolve upon giving poor Mr. Macartney leave to suppose I neglected him, I thought it incumbent upon me to keep my word, since he had not received my letter. I therefore determined to make my own apologies, not to stay with him 2 minutes, and to excuse myself from meeting him any more. Yet, uncertain whether I was wrong or right, it was with fear and trembling that I opened the garden gate. Judge then of my feelings when the first object I saw was Lord Orville. He too looked extremely disconcerted, and said in a hesitating manner, "Pardon me, madam. I did not imagine you would have come here so soon, or I would not have come." And then, with a hasty bow, he passed me and proceeded to the garden. I was scarce able to stand, so greatly did I feel myself shocked, but upon my saying almost involuntarily, "Oh, my lord," he turned back and after a short pause said, "Did you speak to me, ma'am?" I could not immediately answer. I seemed choked, and was even forced to support myself by the garden gate. Lord Orville, soon recovering his dignity, said, "I know not how to apologize for being just now at this place, and I cannot immediately, if ever, clear myself from the imputation of impertinent curiosity, to which I fear you will attribute it. However, at present I will only entreat your pardon without detaining you any longer." Again he bowed and left me. For some moments I remained fixed to the same spot, and in the same position, immovably as if I had been transformed to a stone. My first impulse was to call him back, and instantly tell him the whole affair, but I checked this desire, though I would have given the world to have indulged it. Something like pride aided what I thought due to Mr. Macartney, and I determined not only to keep his secret, but to delay any sort of explanation till Lord Orville should condescend to request it. Slowly he walked, and before he entered the house he looked back, but hastily withdrew his eyes upon finding I observed him. Indeed, my dear sir, you cannot easily imagine a situation more uncomfortable than mine was at that time. To be suspected by Lord Orville of any clandestine actions wounded my soul. I was too much discomposed to wait for Mr. Macartney, nor in truth could I endure to have the design of my staying so well known. Yet I was extremely agitated, that I could hardly move, and I have reason to believe Lord Orville from the parlour window saw me tottering along, for before I had taken 5 steps he came out, and hastening to meet me said, "I fear you are not well. Pray allow me," offering his arm, "to assist you." "No, my lord," said I, with all the resolution I could assume, yet I was affected by an attention at that time so little expected, and forced to turn away my head to conceal my emotion. "You must," said he with earnestness. "Indeed you must. I am sure you are not well. Refuse me not the honour of assisting you." And almost forcibly he took my hand, and drawing it under his arm, obliged me to lean upon him. That I submitted was partly the effect of surprise at an earnestness so uncommon in Lord Orville, and partly that I did not, just then, dare trust my voice to make any objection. When we came to the house, he led me into the parlour, and to a chair, and begged to know if I would not have a glass of water. "No, my lord, I thank you," said I. "I am perfectly recovered." And rising, I walked to the window, where for some time I pretended to be occupied in looking at the garden. Determined as I was to act honourably by Mr. Macartney, I yet most anxiously wished to be restored to the good opinion of Lord Orville, but his silence and the thoughtfulness of his air discouraged me from speaking. My situation grew more disagreeable and embarrassing, and I resolved to return to my chamber till breakfast was ready. To remain longer, I feared, might seem asking for his inquiries, and I was sure it would ill become me to be more eager to speak than he was to hear. Just as I reached the door, turning to me hastily, he said, "Are you going, Miss Anville?" "I am, my lord," answered I, yet I stopped. "Perhaps to return but I beg your pardon." He spoke with a degree of agitation that made me readily comprehend he meant to the garden, and I instantly said, "To my own room, my lord." And again I would have gone, but convinced by my answer that I understood him, I believe he was sorry for the insinuation. He approached me with a very serious air, though at the same time he forced a smile, and said, I know not what evil genius pursues me this morning, but I seem destined to do or say something I ought not. I am so much ashamed of myself that I can scarce solicit your forgiveness." "My forgiveness? My lord!" cried I, abashed rather than elated by his condescension. "Surely you are not serious?" "Indeed, never more so. Yet, if I may be my own interpreter, Miss Anville's countenance pronounces my pardon." "I know not, my lord, how one can pardon who never has been offended." "You are very good. Yet I could expect no less from a sweetness of disposition which baffles all comparison. Will you not think I am an encroacher, and that I take advantage of your goodness, should I once more remind you of the promise you vouchsafed me yesterday?" "No, indeed. On the contrary, I should be very happy to acquit myself in your lordship's opinion." "Acquittal you need not," said he, leading me again to the window. "But I own my curiosity is strongly excited." When I was seated, I found myself much at a loss what to say. Yet after a short silence, assuming all the courage in my power, "Will you not, my lord," said I, "think me trifling and capricious, should I own I have repented the promise I made, and should I entreat your lordship not to insist upon my strict performance of it?" I spoke so hastily that I did not at the time consider the impropriety of what I said. As he was entirely silent and profoundly attentive, I continued to speak without interruption. "If your lordship by any other means knew the circumstances attending my acquaintance with Mr. Macartney, I am most sure you would yourself disapprove of my relating them. He is a gentleman, and has been very unfortunate, but I am not, I think, at liberty to say more. Yet I am sure, if he knew your lordship wished to hear any particulars of his affairs, he would readily consent to my acknowledging them. Shall I, my lord, ask his permission?" "His affairs?" repeated Lord Orville. "By no means. I have not the least curiosity about them." "I beg your lordship's pardon, but indeed I had understood the contrary." "Is it possible, madam, you could suppose the affairs of an utter stranger can excite my curiosity?" The gravity and coldness with which he asked this question very much abashed me. But Lord Orville is the most delicate of men, and presently recollecting himself, he added, "I mean not to speak with indifference of any friend of yours. Far from it. Any such will always command my good wishes. Yet I own I am rather disappointed, and though I doubt not the justice of your reason, to which I implicitly submit, you must not wonder that when upon the point of being honoured with your confidence, I should feel the greatest regret at finding it withdrawn." Do you think, my dear sir, I did not at that moment require all my resolution to guard me from frankly telling him whatever he wished to hear? Yet I rejoice that I did not, for added to the actual wrong I should have done, Lord Orville himself, when he had heard, would, I am sure, have blamed me. Fortunately this thought occurred to me, and I said, "Your lordship shall yourself be my judge. The promise I made, though voluntary, was rash and inconsiderate. Yet had it concerned myself, I would not have hesitated in fulfilling it. But the gentleman whose affairs I should be obliged to relate—" "Pardon me," cried he, "for interrupting you. Yet allow me to assure you I have not the slightest desire to be acquainted with his affairs, further than what belongs to the motives which induced you yesterday morning." He stopped, but there was no occasion to say more. "That, my lord," cried I will tell you honestly. Mr. Macartney had some particular business with me, and I could not take the liberty to ask him hither." "And why not?" "Mrs. Beaumont, I am sure. I could not, my lord, think of intruding upon Mrs. Beaumont's complaisance. And so with the same hasty folly I promised your lordship, I much more rashly promised to meet him." "And did you?" "No, my lord," said I, colouring. "I returned before he came." Again for some time we were both silent. Yet unwilling to leave him to reflections which could not but be to my disadvantage, I summoned sufficient courage to say, "There is no young creature, my lord, who so greatly wants or so earnestly wishes for the advice and assistance of her friends as I do. I am new to the world, and unused to acting for myself. My intentions are never wilfully blamable, yet I err perpetually. I have hitherto been blessed with the most affectionate of friends, and indeed the ablest of men to guide and instruct me upon every occasion. But he is too distant now to be applied to at the moment I want his aid, and here there is not a human being whose counsel I can ask." "Would to heaven," cried he, with a countenance from which all coldness and gravity were banished, and succeeded by the mildest benevolence, "that I were worthy and capable of supplying the place of such a friend to Miss Anville." "You do me but too much honour," said I, Yet I hope your lordship's candour, perhaps I ought to say indulgence, will make some allowance on account of my inexperience for behaviour so inconsiderate. May I, my lord, hope that you will?" "May I," cried he, "hope that you will pardon the ill grace with which I submitted to my disappointment, and that you will permit me," kissing my hand, "thus to seal my peace?" "Our peace, my lord," said I with revived spirits. "This then," said he again, pressing it to his lips, "for our peace. And now, are we not friends?" Just then the door opened, and I had only time to withdraw my hand before the ladies came in to breakfast. I have been all day the happiest of human beings. To be thus reconciled to Lord Orville, and yet to adhere to my resolution, what could I wish for more? He too has been very cheerful, and more attentive, more obliging to me than ever. Yet heaven forbid I should again be in a similar situation, for I cannot express how much uneasiness I have suffered from the fear of incurring his ill opinion. But what will poor Mr. Macartney think of me? Happy as I am, I much regret the necessity I have been under of disappointing him. Adieu, my dearest sir. You know, I said it earlier in a previous episode that I found Lord Orville a difficult character to get a grip on. And I certainly did when I read Evelina as a teenager. I find him now very easy to read, I have to say, with a bit more life experience. I think even though he has been seen purely through Evelina's extremely biased eyes, Fanny Burney writes it in such a way that his motivations and his behaviour and his feelings are all extremely obvious. And coming back to the novel now as an adult and reading it again, I'm delighted with my greater understanding of Lord Orville's character that I'm getting out of this. Anyway, we continue. Letter the 67th. Mr. Villiers to Evelina. Berry Hill, 28th September. Dead to the world, and equally insensible to its pleasures or its pains, I long since bid adieu to all joy, and defiance to all sorrow, but what should spring from my Evelina, sole source to me of all earthly felicity. How strange then is it that the letter in which she tells me she is the happiest of human beings should give me the most mortal inquietude. Alas, my friend, my child, that innocence, the first best gift of heaven, should of all others be the blindest to its own danger, the most exposed to treachery, and the least able to defend itself in a world where it is little known, less valued, and perpetually deceived. Would to heaven you were here! Then, by degrees and with gentleness, I might enter upon a subject too delicate for distant discussion. Yet it is too interesting, and the situation too critical to allow of delay. Oh, my Evelina, your situation is critical indeed. Your peace of mind is at stake, and every chance for your future happiness may depend upon the conduct of the present moment. Hitherto I have forborne to speak with you upon the most important of all concerns, the state of your heart. Alas, I needed no information. I have been silent indeed, but I have not been blind. Long and with the deepest regret have I perceived the ascendancy which Lord Orville has gained upon your mind. You will start at the mention of his name. You will tremble every word you read. I grieve to give pain to my gentle Evelina, but I dare not any longer spare her. Your first meeting with Lord Orville was decisive. Lively, fearless, free from all other impressions, such a man as you describe him could not fail of exciting your admiration, and the more dangerously because he seemed as unconscious of his power as you of your weakness, and therefore you had no alarm either from his vanity or your own prudence. Young, animated, entirely off your guard, and thoughtless of consequences, imagination took the reins, and reason, slow-paced though sure-footed, was unequal to a race with so eccentric and flighty a companion. How rapid was then my Evelina's progress through these regions of fancy and passion whither her new guide conducted her. She saw Lord Orville at a ball, and he was the most amiable of men. She met him again at another, and he had every virtue under heaven. I mean not to depreciate the merit of Lord Orville, who, one mysterious instance alone excepted, seems to have deserved the idea you formed of his character. But it was not time, it was not the knowledge of his worth obtained your regard. Your new comrade had not patience to wait any trial. Her glowing pencil, dipped in the vivid colours of her creative ideas, painted to you at the moment of your first acquaintance all the excellences, all the good and rare qualities which a great length of time and intimacy could alone have really discovered. You flattered yourself that your partiality was the effect of esteem founded upon a general love of merit and a principle of justice, and your heart, which fell the sacrifice of your error, was totally gone ere you suspected it was in danger. 1,000 times have I been upon the point of showing you the perils of your situation, but the same inexperience which occasioned your mistake, I hoped with the assistance of time and absence would effect a cure. I was indeed most unwilling to destroy your illusion, which I dared hope it might itself contribute to the restoration of your tranquillity, since your ignorance of the danger and force of your attachment might possibly prevent that despondency with which young people in similar circumstances are apt to persuade themselves that what is only difficult is absolutely impossible. But now, since you have again met and have become more intimate than ever, all my hope from silence and seeming ignorance is at an end. Awake then, my dear, my deluded child, awake to the sense of your danger, and exert yourself to avoid the evils with which it threatens you. Evils which to a mind like yours are most to be dreaded, secret repining, and concealed yet consuming regret. Make a noble effort for the recovery of your peace, which now with sorrow I see it depends wholly upon the presence of Lord Orville. This effort may indeed be painful, but trust to my experience when I assure you it is requisite. You must quit him. His sight is baneful to your repose, his society is death to your future tranquillity. Believe me, my beloved child, my heart aches for your suffering, while it dictates its necessity. Could I flatter myself that Lord Orville would indeed be sensible of your worth, and act with a nobleness of mind which would prove it congenial to his own, would then I leave my Evelina to the unmolested enjoyment of the cheerful society and increasing regard of a man she so greatly admires. But this is not an age in which we may trust to appearances, and imprudence is much sooner regretted than repaired. Your health, you tell me, is much mended. Can you then consent to leave Bristol? Not abruptly, that I do not desire, but in a few days from the time you receive this. I will write to Mrs. Selwyn and tell her how much I wish your return, and Mrs. Clinton can take sufficient care of you. I have meditated upon every possible expedient that might tend to your happiness, ere I fixed upon exacting from you a compliance which I am convinced will be most painful to you. But I can satisfy myself in none. This will at least be safe, and as to success, we must leave it to time. I am very glad to hear of Mr. Macartney's welfare. Adieu, my dearest child. Heaven preserve and strengthen you. Mr. Villars, come on! Well, I suppose someone's got to object to romance. Wouldn't be a novel otherwise. All right, I will leave you there for this evening. Have a good evening.